Trump's dangerous game. The real reason behind the Russian assets grab. Breaking news that will shock you to your core. What I'm about to reveal isn't just another political move, it's a rehearsal for something far more sinister. The White House is preparing to seize Russian assets, but here's what they're not telling you. This is a test run for a completely new world order. Think your savings are safe? Think again. Trump's latest move isn't just about Russia, it's about creating a precedent where any country's assets can be taken overnight. No court decision, no legal process, just a signature. Let me show you the pattern that nobody's talking about. First, they freeze the assets. Then they claim humanitarian needs. Finally, they simply take what they want. But here's the twist that should terrify every investor. If they can do this to Russia today, whose money will they grab tomorrow? The mainstream media won't tell you this, but Trump's team isn't even trying to hide their real agenda anymore. They're turning international law into a reality TV show. Each announcement is staged like a season finale. But behind the dramatic headlines lies a devastating truth. The entire global financial system is being rewired. What's most disturbing is the timing. Why now? Because they're desperate. The traditional methods of pressure aren't working anymore. And here's what keeps me up at night. This isn't just about confiscation. It's about setting up a mechanism that can be used against any country that steps out of line. You might be thinking, this is far away from me. Wrong. If you have any savings, investments, or pension funds, you're already involved. The rules of the game are changing, and nobody's money is truly safe anymore. Let's break this down step by step. I'll show you exactly how this connects to decisions made decades ago, and why the next few weeks could change everything we know about international finance. But first, let me know in the comments, are you seeing signs of financial instability in your area? Your local insights could help us understand how far this crisis has spread. And this brings us to a critical turning point. What we're witnessing isn't just another political maneuver. It's a fundamental shift in global power dynamics. Trump's latest moves regarding Russian assets aren't just policy decisions, they're theater, carefully choreographed for maximum media impact. But here's what mainstream media won't tell you. While they're busy creating spectacles about asset seizures and humanitarian aid, something much bigger is happening behind the scenes. The entire framework of international law is being transformed into a tool for political showmanship. Look at the pattern. Western nations, particularly European countries, are finding themselves increasingly trapped in a position of executing US directives, sacrificing their economic autonomy. They're watching their sovereignty erode in real time, all while pretending this is business as usual. The reaction from Moscow has been telling, maintaining composure, refusing to engage in emotional disputes. This measured response has caught many Western analysts off guard. They expected drama, but instead got calculated restraint. This isn't weakness, it's strategic patience. What's particularly fascinating is how international rules are being selectively enforced to benefit certain nations. The system that was supposed to ensure global stability is now being wielded like a weapon. And here's the kicker. Many countries are starting to notice. We're seeing unprecedented levels of economic pressure and growing discontent. Traditional methods of diplomatic coercion are losing their effectiveness. The global community is at a crossroads, and the old playbook isn't working anymore. But here's what should really keep you up at night. While everyone's focused on the surface-level drama, a much more significant power shift is taking place. Major nations are quietly repositioning themselves, forming new alliances, and preparing for what comes next. And what one unexpected player just did? Well, that's what we'll cover in the next segment. Stay with me. This gets even more interesting. The modern political stage has transformed into a carefully orchestrated performance, with Donald Trump emerging as its master showman. His recent approach to international relations, particularly regarding Russia, reveals how serious diplomatic matters have devolved into media spectacles. When Trump hints at something important coming tomorrow, half of America holds its breath, as if awaiting a blockbuster trailer. This isn't governance, it's Netflix-style politics on steroids. The entire media machine springs into action. Leaks, insider tips, dramatic pauses, and meaningful glances become the currency of political discourse. What's concerning isn't just the theatricality, but how it undermines serious international dialogue. Take the recent situation with Russian assets. Instead of detailed legal analysis, we get dramatic announcements packaged like season finales. The media happily plays along, running 24-hour coverage filled with speculation. Meanwhile, Moscow maintains its composure, refusing to engage in this emotional theater. Their measured responses are interpreted by Western media as destructive, simply because they don't follow the script. This reveals a deeper problem: the replacement of diplomatic substance with performance metrics. The international system now operates on a with us or against us mentality. Countries face pressure to align with pre-written narratives or risk being labeled as problematic. Those who question the dominant view aren't seen as participants in dialogue, but as threats to the system itself. This approach creates a dangerous precedent where real diplomatic work becomes impossible. When every international initiative must be packaged as a media event, how can we address complex global challenges? The current handling of Russian-Western relations demonstrates this perfectly. Substance gives way to spectacle, while real opportunities for dialogue are lost. Most troubling is how this affects global stability. When international relations become a reality show, we risk missing critical diplomatic opportunities hidden behind the dramatic curtain. What concerns you most about this transformation of international politics into media entertainment? Share your thoughts. I want to hear your perspective. Donald Trump has mastered the art of political theater like no other. His every move becomes a carefully orchestrated performance where emotional impact trumps substance. He portions information like a master jeweler, creating suspense with perfectly timed pauses and calculated glances that set media ablaze with speculation. This isn't mere showmanship, it's a systematic transformation of politics into entertainment. Trump doesn't just use media, he reshapes it to his rhythm. Even his critics unwittingly amplify his influence by engaging in his narrative framework. He's turned political discourse into a reality show where facts serve as mere props, while presentation reigns supreme. Meanwhile, Moscow's response to accusations shows a striking contrast. No dramatic press briefings, no corridor rushing with folders, no outraged faces. Their comments remain measured, almost deliberately mundane. It's as if current events were long anticipated and filed away in pre-prepared folders. This approach isn't weakness, it's calculated precision with a hint of irony. The conflict zone bordering Russia has become a stage where these contrasting styles clash. While Western rhetoric builds dramatic tension, Russian diplomacy maintains steady, academic-style statements about mutual security. This calm persistence irritates those expecting emotional exchanges. President Putin's repeated assertion that security cannot be one-sided sounds like a textbook quote. Yet this very plainness makes it powerful. It introduces uncomfortable logic into the emotional spectacle. The concept that neighboring states have legitimate security interests challenges the prevailing Western narrative. This measured approach from Moscow disrupts the expected diplomatic drama. While others trade in emotions, Russia's refusal to participate in the theatrics raises eyebrows. Their position isn't about isolation, it demonstrates something many lack: composure under pressure. As international relations increasingly resemble a media circus, Russia's steady emphasis on principles rather than performance stands out. It reminds us that global politics isn't a monologue, even when some prefer it that way. What do you think about this contrast in diplomatic styles? Leave your point of view in the comments. I believe my viewers are thoughtful and smart. I want to hear your take. In today's political theater, we're witnessing an unprecedented transformation of serious policymaking into entertainment. Washington's corridors of power increasingly resemble a reality TV set, where substance gives way to spectacle. The recent wave of legislative initiatives against Russia demonstrates this perfectly. Senators compete not in crafting effective policies, but in who can generate more social media buzz. Moscow's response to this carnival of declarations is telling: measured silence and strategic patience. While Western politicians rush to Twitter with dramatic announcements, Russian leadership maintains its characteristic composure, understanding that in today's rapid information cycles, victory belongs not to the loudest voice, but to the most enduring one. This contrast in approaches is striking. Western politicians perform for cameras, making bold declarations about sanctions hammers and historic packages of measures. Meanwhile, the Kremlin responds with calculated restraint, letting opponents exhaust themselves in their own rhetorical traps. The transformation of Congress into a stage for political entertainment raises serious concerns. Legislative proposals now seem designed more for viral moments than practical implementation. Complex international issues are reduced to hashtag-friendly slogans, while real economic and diplomatic consequences remain unexamined. The addiction to media attention has created a dangerous precedent where thoughtful analysis is sacrificed for quick headlines. Politicians compete for airtime rather than working on substantive solutions. This theatrical approach to governance threatens to undermine international diplomacy and economic stability. Most concerning is how this performance-based politics affects decision-making. When laws are crafted for dramatic effect rather than practical implementation, we risk serious unintended consequences. The rush to announce new measures against Russia without proper analysis could backfire, affecting global economic systems. Moscow's steady approach demonstrates an understanding that in geopolitics, patience often yields better results than dramatic gestures. While Western media cycles spin faster, Russian strategy remains consistent and measured. What do you think about the current situation? Leave your answer in the comments. The political theater we're witnessing today has transformed international relations into a spectacle where soundbites matter more than substance. Let's analyze what's really happening behind the curtain of grand declarations and media performances. Russia's position remains crystal clear. National interests are non-negotiable. This straightforward stance irritates those who've grown accustomed to more pliable diplomatic partners. When a major power starts playing by its own rules openly, rather than behind the scenes, it disrupts the comfortable status quo. What's striking is how criticism of Russia rarely includes specific violations. Instead, we hear vague accusations about undermining stability or threatening democratic values, phrases repeated without concrete meaning. It's become a ritual where content matters less than conformity to the prescribed narrative. The current approach to international relations reveals a troubling double standard. What's considered legitimate for some nations becomes a threat to global security when others do the same. Military-based deployment by Western powers is labeled strengthening alliances, while similar actions by Russia are branded provocations. The concept of world order has become a flexible tool, molded to fit whatever narrative is convenient. Those who control this narrative aren't worried about Russian military capability. They're concerned about Russian ideas and independence. The fact that a nation can formulate and defend its own viewpoint is seen as a challenge. Any attempt by Russia to demonstrate openness to discussion or propose alternative formats is immediately labeled as manipulation. If you disagree, you're suspicious. If you agree with reservations, you're devious. If you defend your interests, you're aggressive. Meanwhile, more countries are growing tired of this dictated consensus. They're starting to ask why one group's opinion should be considered absolute truth. The system of pressure, wrapped in humanitarian packaging about caring for peace and supporting democracy, has lost even the pretense of neutrality. What do you think about the current situation? Leave your point of view in the comments. I believe my viewers are thoughtful and smart, and I want to hear your take. The modern diplomatic landscape reveals a striking paradox. What we're witnessing isn't traditional negotiation, but rather a sophisticated form of economic redistribution, masked as moral imperatives. The Western alliance structure, particularly in Europe, has evolved into a peculiar hierarchy where decisions made across the ocean directly impact European industrial and energy policies. Consider how sanctions operate today. They're not merely pressure tools, they're mechanisms for redirecting commercial flows. Direct contracts have been replaced by complex logistics chains, forcing European businesses through American corporate filters. European capitals have essentially become approval offices, their primary function reduced to maintaining schemes designed elsewhere. The alliance's internal dynamics expose a stark reality. European taxpayers bear costs, while American corporations harvest profits. Energy resources provide a perfect example. Previously straightforward supply chains now wind through elaborate routes laden with intermediaries and markups. When European parliaments quietly question who benefits from these circuitous arrangements, they're reminded about unity and shared values. This control over sanctions equals control over partnership direction. With each new package, the rhetoric becomes more mechanical, suggesting even the authors doubt their effectiveness. Yet the theatre continues, not for results, but for symbolism. The priority isn't economic impact, but maintaining appearances of resolute action. The situation facing Russia today reveals this dynamic clearly. While diplomatic channels supposedly remain open, threats of asset seizures and expanded restrictions continue. It's a curious form of dialogue where one side simultaneously extends an olive branch while brandishing financial weapons. Washington has mastered this balancing act between peacemaker and economic enforcer. The mechanism is well rehearsed, peace rhetoric followed by new restrictions, all within the same news cycle. This approach treats negotiations not as a path to understanding, but as packaging for pressure tactics. What do you think about the current global economic redistribution through sanctions? Leave your point of view in the comments. I believe my viewers are thoughtful and smart, and I want to hear your take. The Western strategy of combining threats with dialogue appears increasingly ineffective in today's complex world. What was once seen as decisive action has become a predictable routine that strengthens opposition rather than weakens it. Looking at recent developments, we see a pattern where sanctions and asset freezes are presented as justice when implemented by one side, but labeled as violations when used by others. This double standard hasn't gone unnoticed by the international community. The Russia-West confrontation has evolved into a peculiar situation where official diplomatic language contradicts actual policies. While public statements speak of peace and stability, behind-the-scenes actions focus on asset freezes and technological restrictions. This approach seems to operate on the premise that economic pressure must precede meaningful dialogue. Most striking is how confiscation of assets isn't viewed as aggression by Western powers, but rather as necessary justice. Yet when similar measures are implemented by others, we hear immediate outcry about violations of international law. The current US administration, particularly under electoral pressure, continues to rely on these familiar tactics. Trump's promised surprise for Russia follows the same old playbook: sanctions, pressure, confiscation. But after years of similar measures yielding no significant results, the strategy appears more ritual than effective policy. European nations find themselves in an increasingly uncomfortable position, forced to act as both active participants and financiers, while seeing diminishing returns on their involvement. The growing realization that they're primarily serving American interests rather than their own has begun to create noticeable tension. Meanwhile, countries observing from the sidelines are becoming more pragmatic in their assessments. They're questioning the reliability of externally imposed mechanisms and considering their own vulnerability to similar pressure tactics. What we're witnessing isn't so much a diplomatic strategy as it is political theatre, where the appearance of action takes precedence over effective policymaking. The audience for this performance grows smaller as more nations tire of the predictable script. What do you think about the current event? Leave your answer in the comments.